In recent years, the signals between Taehyung and Jungkook have been constant, but this new moment in 2025 made everything even clearer. Jungkook made two very specific gestures with his hands. With one of them, he formed what can be interpreted as the letter V, a symbol that for years has been directly linked to Taehyung, who is known for using the letter V as his stage name. With his other hand, he imitated a movement like that of a tiger, the animal with which Taehyung has long been linked. This combination of gestures doesn't seem casual or improvised. On the contrary, it seems like Jungkook decided to make Taehyung present in that moment, without saying a single word. These gestures have been seen on other occasions as well. For years now, whenever one of them is not physically present, the other makes some sign that connects with their image. This has become a constant in the way they interact publicly. What's interesting isn't just that Jungkook made that gesture, but how Taehyung responded. At another point, he could be seen acknowledging what Jungkook was doing. It was a silent but very clear confirmation, demonstrating how a different kind of communication exists between them. In this new phase, with both of them back and more present in the media, not only the gestures return, but also the synchronicity. It's not about sharing a stage or being together on a recording. It's what happens when there are no cameras on, when they think no one is watching them. That naturalness with which they act can only emerge from a real relationship. And although some insist on calling it fan service, the pattern always contradicts them. No show is repeated with such consistency and such depth. For years, those who closely observe Taehyung and Jungkook know that there are a series of constant signals between them. These aren't just coincidences or random gestures. At concerts, interviews, and important events, the two repeat a clear and recognizable sequence that has caught the attention of Taehyung fans. One of the most obvious gestures occurs when Jungkook forms the letter V with his fingers, a gesture that represents Taehyung's name, and then makes the letter K, making it clear that the message points directly to the term Taehyung. These movements aren't isolated. When Taehyung takes the initiative, he does exactly the same thing, but in reverse order. He first forms the K, pointing at Jungkook, and then the V, thus completing a cycle of gestures that mirror each other. This creates a shared sequence, as if both were sending and receiving messages that only they understand. The most important thing about these gestures is not only their repetition, but the precision with which they are executed. These aren't random signals, but rather a kind of silent routine that reveals how deeply they've developed a unique nonverbal language. And this consistency is only achieved through a deep bond. When one begins the sequence, the other completes it without exchanging words. This demonstrates the emotional synchrony between them that manifests in every public appearance. There's no need for words when two people understand each other just by looking at each other. That's what happens between Taehyung and Jungkook. Their gestures, their movements, and the small things they share are enough to show that there's something very deep between them. What Taehyung and Jungkook notice isn't a show or an act. It's the way they live their daily lives, unspoken, but unconcealed. When they're together, you can see how they communicate without speaking. Sometimes, just looking at each other is enough for something to happen. A smile, a reaction, a hand gesture. It's not a coincidence. It's a constantly repeating pattern, present in both videos and more natural recordings. There's always a moment when hands touch very subtly, or when one leans toward the other, certain that they'll be received. What they share isn't in the words they say, but in the things they do when they think no one is watching. There are scenes where they share a coffee, others where one creates a playlist designed for the other. There are also moments where, under a table, a hand is held without anyone noticing. None of this is staged. It's a way of caring for something that is only theirs. They aren't looking to prove anything. There's no need for them to explain what they feel. And that's what makes it all the more meaningful. People who understand Taekook don't wait for grand declarations. They wait for the real moments, those that only happen when they're together. Because what unites them is based on customs, on small actions repeated naturally. During breaks, in hallways away from the public, or on silent outings at night, those scenes always appear where the two connect as if nothing else existed. These are moments where there are no witnesses, but Taekookers know how to identify them. Because it's not about proving anything. It's about a real, simple, and private routine. There are those who still try to justify what happens between Taehyung and Jungkook as part of a show, something prepared for the public. But the reality is completely different. There's no way so many gestures, glances, and synchronized reactions could be part of a script. There's a particular way they relate to each other. They don't look around before acting, they don't wait for approval or seek attention. They simply act as if the world around them doesn't exist. And that's what makes it all the more powerful. For years, Taehyung fans have followed every detail closely. What stands out in the relationship between Taehyung and Jungkook isn't the grand declarations, but the subtlety of their gestures. The way they communicate without speaking is a language of its own, one that isn't learned, but rather develops between two people who know each other deeply. When Jungkook imitates a tiger with his hand or draws a letter in the air, he doesn't do it randomly. He does it knowing that Taehyung will understand exactly what he means. And Taehyung doesn't need an explanation to respond. This type of communication has been seen on many previous occasions, and it becomes clearer each time. What sets them apart isn't just the way they understand each other without words, but that understanding has remained intact over the years. Even when they were separated by military service, that connection didn't disappear. On the contrary, it returned even stronger as soon as they reunited. Taehyung fans know this. Every gesture has an intention, and every intention reflects a strong and lasting relationship. In 2025, the bond between Taehyung and Jungkook remains strong. And every moment like this is another piece in a puzzle that, for those who observe it closely, already has a very clear picture. A relationship that needs no explanation, because their gestures say it all. Every action, no matter how small, fits perfectly into a story that has been building for years in front of everyone. And although some choose to ignore it, Taekookers are very clear, the tests don't stop, and the connection keeps growing. It's not just about one or two gestures. There's something deeper in the way Taehyung and Jungkook interact, an emotional pattern that repeats consistently. The moments they share in public aren't isolated, nor are they improvised. Every glance, every hand gesture, every way they approach each other physically is part of a kind of silent routine. And that's what makes the difference. This kind of routine isn't built overnight. It requires time, trust, and a very strong connection. We're not just seeing gestures, we're witnessing the repetition of small actions that only happen when the two are together. Taehyung and Jungkook have noticed this for years. When they're close, attitudes change, gestures multiply, and their attention to each other is constant. One of the strongest signs of this pattern is how they maintain consistency between what they do in different situations. It doesn't matter if they're on stage, in an interview, or in a casual video, there's always a way in which one alludes to the other. This emotional routine doesn't need words, nor does it change over time. On the contrary, it has grown stronger. Taekookers have collected these kinds of moments for years, and what you see is a clear structure. There's a way they search for each other with their eyes. A way they name each other without speaking. And an internal logic in the way they repeat their gestures as if each knew the other's reaction perfectly well. This isn't improvisation, it's learned intimacy. Another detail is how these behaviors don't diminish, even when they're surrounded by other people. There's always a space reserved for them, even if they're not the center of attention. It's as if their bond has its own space within the group. This constant is what makes each appearance together have a distinct value. You don't need them to hug or say anything to notice that a solid, almost automatic emotional routine exists. In every public appearance between Taehyung and Jungkook, there's one detail that always recurs: they behave as if they have a connection that doesn't need explaining. It doesn't matter if they're surrounded by people, lights, cameras, or noise. They maintain a form of communication that only they understand. Taehyung fans have long observed this and found something very clear: when one moves, the other responds. When one acts, the other completes the action. This pattern doesn't just happen. It's a way of being together that seems long established. In the videos, it's common to see their movements synchronized. For example, if Taehyung makes a hand gesture, Jungkook follows it or replicates it without hesitation. If one reaches out a hand, the other responds immediately. That only happens when two people have a firm, silent, and constant connection. It's not about them doing the same thing all the time, but about how they adapt to each other without having to think about it. This way of acting together doesn't build quickly. It's a routine that forms over time, repeating actions, sharing small moments, and recognizing each other's reactions in every situation. An important detail is that this routine doesn't change no matter where they are. Whether at an important event, on stage, or in a more private moment, the behaviors remain the same. It's not something they do only in front of fans. It's part of their way of experiencing their relationship. It's something that flows effortlessly, something that doesn't seek attention, but it's noticeable. This is further confirmed when you observe the times when one of them reacts even without looking directly at the other. There are times, for example, when Jungkook seems to know what Taehyung is doing behind his back. The same thing happens the other way around. It's as if their senses are connected. That kind of connection isn't learned quickly. It's the result of spending time together and having an intimate and constant relationship.